right, Professor Gilbert Ramirez in the house, 4th degree black belt. I was like, wow, you're 4th degree. This
Yeah.
was it 3 months ago? He got promoted.
I think it was a couple of months ago. I still can't believe it. Never imagined I never even imagined that I'd be a black belt.
Yeah.
And I remember when I started. I remember my first.
When did you start?
I started in, I think it would have been the winter of '94.
94.
And a mutual friend of ours, John Awano, we literally met our first week together at RCJ Machado, John Jacques Machado's school. And we hit it off then, became friends. So we're white belts together. He later on moved on to train under Carlson Gracie and Rodrigo Medeiros. And so I reacquainted with him. And I think by then he was a purple and I was a blue. But I started with the with the Machados. Interesting story of how I started. UFC 1. Watched that with a bunch of my friends, and one of them said, and I live near the Gracie Academy. I'm going to go check out the school. And we all thought, okay, cool, looks good. But my first impression of jiu-jitsu is like, that doesn't look that hard. I could do that. I can get out of that position. And fast forward to, I think it was the middle of '94 that we were watching UFC 3 together. And same thing, about 7, 8 of us watching it. And my buddy Art had now been training for about 7 or 8 months under Hicks and Gracie. And he had just been awarded his blue belt, because I think back then in those days you got your blue belt a little earlier, right?
Earlier?
That was my recall. That normally it was probably like about 8 to 12 months you would get your blue belt. Today it seems to be an average of maybe 2 years.
Yeah, it depends, right? But yeah, I thought it was, I mean, I remember back in the day to be a blue belt or a purple belt, like, it was like, wow, you're it's like a black belt now,
Well, we're watching UFC 3, and he had dislocated his shoulder. So he showed up, arm in a sling. He was the smallest guy in the room. And once again, we're watching UFC 3, thinking that doesn't look that hard. I could do that. So we had been drinking. My friend that hosted the event, he had we moved the sofas aside, and we had a little mock tournament there. A bunch of drunken, untrained slobs. We made the brackets and ended up elbows in the face, rug burns, bent fingers, you name it. I think I sprained my ankle that night. That was the first time I ever rolled with anyone. But my buddy Art, being the lightest guy in the room with his arm in a sling, submitted his 3 opponents easily. And
with his arm in a sling.
With one arm, smallest guy, with 7, 8 months of training. And we said, okay, there's something about this Art.
Did you do martial arts before?
No, never. Nothing. I think, I think if anything, maybe I was a skateboarder when I was a kid, but a teenager, but had never done anything else, and I had no idea of what to expect. So 2 of us decided we're going to sign up. One of my best friends went to go sign up with my friend Art. They went to Hickson School, and I went to check it out. But there was just no way I was going to be able to make it to that school. I think this was late '94, so that you really had 3 choices. You had Joe Moreira in Orange County. You had Hickson on the west side, and the Machado brothers in Tarzana or Redondo Beach by then. Right. I had a field sales position there in a company car, so I just worked out my agenda so I could be within commuting distance of the Machado brothers. And so I signed up there and was there for about 2 years, and I loved it, and it was amazing. And of course, they come from similar roots.
Gracie Baja and Carlos Gracie Jr.
Yeah, and I'm glad I did. I did a lot of backyard training with my 2 buddies over at Hickson. So on the weekends, we would get together in my backyard, throw out blankets and sheets, and just roll around and exchange techniques. But I'm glad that I started with the Machado brothers, John Jacques, because I'm sure you've seen him many times and know him, but he had probably the most beautiful style of jiu-jitsu. And the Machados were always friendly, always non-aggressive. They were probably the most artistic in their expression of jiu-jitsu, and that was my first influence. And one of my best moments then, this would have been '95 that I was training there, is one day John Jacques lined up everybody in the class. We must have had about 25 to 30 students. He lined them up from white, plenty of white, a lot of blue, couple of purple, maybe one brown belt, and that was David Meyer, one of the original Dirty Dozen.
Yeah.
Lined them all up, and he rolled with everyone. And we all just sat silent, just watching him, dispatch everyone easily. And as he got more tired, we kind of thought the purple belts and the brown would give him a tougher time. No. By this time, he was a little tired, so he took them out even quicker than the white belts who he toyed with and the blue belts. And that was just an amazing sight just to see that. Yeah. So
yeah, I had a moment like that with Carlos Machado.
Oh, really?
I went out to visit him. He was at the Walker, Texas Ranger studio. He had moved to Texas, right?
Yeah.
Like, whatever, or 95 probably. So he was the first black belt I got to meet. 94, I think 94 probably then.
Yeah.
95. And he lined everybody up and just went through every single person and tapped them all out like it was like nothing.
Yeah.
Like a warm up, No effort, right? And I was like, wow, that's what a black belt is.
And I just assumed back then, I'm never going to get there. I'm never going to be at that level. And especially because I think back then it was only Brazilians.
Right.
And I was thinking, well, they're born into this. They're rolling right outside of the crib almost. And so I actually always, the only belt I think I ever desired was the blue belt, right? And the one thing I miss about these days is it was early in, it was still in the, UFC was still in the single digits.
Yeah.
And we would get, they're not quite dojo stormers, but there were people that wanted to test themselves. Yeah. And they were always friendly. And I remember there was a bullpen of blue belts there, right? And I didn't realize then that I was the fresh meat, right? I was the white belt. I was the easy target, the one that people enjoyed probably tossing around and torturing. But the blue belts were such a strong, stable, and they were the first line of defense because the Machados, I think on a weekly basis, we'd have someone that wanted to test themselves. So they'd always have to go with the blue belt first, Hey, Gilbert Chi, come over here, go with this guy. He's a wrestler guy, wants to try out jiu-jitsu. And those were like battles, back in those days. But when the blue belts...
And you had to represent.
You had to represent. Put it down. You had all your friends watching.
It was like your honor and your everything, right?
It's a challenge, right? And so I wanted to be
athletic wrestling guys that, were out to prove.
Right. But the blue belt, at that time, I was like, I want to be one of those guys because that's attainable. Those were all local folks that have trained in the art and got to that level within a year or two. And then back then, purple belts were rare, but we had a few. And... when those guys walked in the room, you're just like, wow, those guys got to that level. And just even watching them was impressive. But I do miss that. We used to get a lot of visitors. Yeah. And Jean-Jacques was always welcoming about it. And then also Renato Magno was my other instructor back in those days. So I missed him, but I just wasn't able to get out there anymore. So that's when I switched to Rodrigo Medeiros, who had just opened up a school in Whittier. And of course, he's from the Carlson Gracie side.
Right.
And that's where I reacquainted with John Owano, who is an instructor there, and we've just been great friends ever since.
Yeah, those are the early days, right? Of jiu-jitsu in the world, really around the world.
Yeah, and I remember
SoCal being one of the kind of the first after Brazil, right?
Yeah. And what I remember about those days is, so I'm going to start to sound like that old guy back in my day. But back in my day, we didn't have YouTube, right? We couldn't download videos from BJJ Fanatics, so we'd always have to hope that we can get one of those VHS copies of a copy of a copy. And I remember the two videos that I got my hands on. One was it actually wasn't the full movie; it was the outtakes from Hicks and Gracie Choke.
Okay.
You remember the one where he's doing all the breathing techniques? And so that one I got. And another one, I think it was the first Mundials from Brazil. Tijuca Tennis Club, the very first one. It was such a poor quality copy, but I just watched that.
How'd you get the video? A friend of a friend of a friend.
A friend of a friend of a friend. But I think the Choke video, if I remember the guy.
The Choke video was out there.
Yeah. I think because it was the outtakes, I think
gotcha.
We had a guy that had a friend that worked for the production company, but it was like a 45-minute video of him training and also rolling at his old studio. And it was, to me, it was gold. I just studied that over and over and over. But the other thing was what's funny about those days, we all learned from a Brazilian back then. So whatever the Brazilian was like. And today now you got schools, you know, I probably drove past a dozen really good schools on my way here from my house. But few people are training under Brazilians these days. And I was teaching a class.
Things have changed a lot, right?
Yeah, I was teaching a class once where I made a reference to choo-choo breathing. You know, choo-choo. And then they all looked at me funny. I'm like, you guys have never trained under Brazilian. You don't know what choo-choo breathing is. Oh, let me tell you, my friend. And so I still do it. I still do that breathing technique because I learned it, I think, from John Jock and Hodger back in the day.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, things have shifted a lot, right?
Yeah.
From those days, you know, the tournament scenes and just everything, right? Just how to learn. Like I always tell the story of how I had to get, you know, luckily I went to Brazil, and luckily, but I had the opportunity to go to Brazil. But even so, like you had to like find a guy with VHS tapes, and those things were gold.
Yeah.
And then like Scotty from On the Mat, do you remember that?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they would record stuff at the tournaments, and that was another way we could get footage and study it and break it down. Yeah, I still have those VHS tapes. I had them in my like in a shed, and like after a while they're destroyed, right? They're not good anymore, you know. But those were like so valuable to learn jiu-jitsu.
The other rarity back in those days is having that friend that would bring back some gis, right? The old Krugen's gis, the bad boy gis, and all those.
Tama, yeah.
Yeah, Tama. And I remember you mentioned about the tournament scene back then. I remember the very first tournament. I think it was 96. I think that was the very first Pans. The very first Pans.
I think 95, 96, yeah.
It's around then.
95, 96.
You remember a huge number.
There was a Joe Moreira, and there was the Pans.
Yeah.
And they were like, I think the first Worlds was 96, so I think it was 96 then, right?
Yeah, I think it
Depends.
The first one I remember was Irvine, where there was a huge amount of Brazilians.
Right, yeah.
And they all showed up in these gis that were all.
They all stayed by
up.
LAX, right, too.
Right, and they all
and all the gis were like hung out on the balconies and stuff.
And they were all patched out. They looked like NASCAR race drivers, and they looked so menacing, right? I was just like, oh my God, what are we in for? I competed at that one as a blue belt, and I wasn't the top guy in my weight division or even the next division up. So I think I had to compete against a guy 40 pounds heavier than me that was also a judo black belt.
Oh, okay.
And he tossed me around and never made me tap, but I wish he had. And this amazing photo of, you know, them holding up his hand as the winner. And I'm barely standing there because this guy just ran over me like a freight truck.
I was trying to think of just moments like when you knew, like I'm just back in my day, like this is it. This is what I want to do. I want this. You're like, this is it. This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
What was that moment for you? You watched the early FCs, but what was the moment like maybe on the mat or, you know, you were seeing all these guys with these NASCAR gis, you know, looking gis.
Yeah, because I honestly can't say I enjoyed the competition part of it, because I think the first competitions for anyone are going to be a very humbling experience. However, I did continue to compete since then. But that's a great question because, and I always say this too, and one of the things I absolutely love about jiu-jitsu is the people, the friendships. And I've been involved in different sports, but I've never made friends like I have in jiu-jitsu. And I'm convinced it's because of this one thing, the white belt years. Because anyone with a fragile ego does not survive that. And, you know, hard to think back and think about missing my white belt days. But having got through that, I think once I got my blue belt, then I felt like I'm accepted into the tribe. I'm a member. This is a thing now. And in all my years, in all the iterations of my training history, I've never, ever thought about quitting. It was just never even a thought to me. Only now that I'm older am I thinking about, like, okay, how much longer can I sustain this? But then I'm here at Legacy and I see Savage walking around the mats. And I remember when I first met him.
Close to 80.
Yeah, and I remember when I first met him, I'm like, who is that guy? He looks like the mat enforcer, just, you know, older than I recall for those days. And I remember the first few times I rolled with him, and man, is he scrappy. And I said, I think this was maybe 2 years ago when I first rolled with him. I said, but he's like a 78-year-old Wagner Rocha, with the hard collar ties, and he's intense. And and he'll always show you something too. That's the other thing. Afterwards, he'll give you a tip, and I love that about him. But I also have another friend. The day that I got my 4th degree, a friend of mine named Ted. I think Ted is 76, and he just got his black belt.
Wow.
And
it's inspiring, right? These guys are like, me too.
Yeah.
I look at Savage, and I always talk to him and ask his thoughts about things, and even on training, right?
Yeah, yeah.
His mindset, what keeps him motivated.
Mm-hmm. I stopped training for about 5 years. I think after I got my black belt, aside from some garage training, a few open mats. But in my mid-40s, I was suffering quite a bit of injuries. I was probably about 15 pounds heavier, not in particularly good shape. I was just relying on brute strength and technique to get through the matches. But I had a pretty significant abdominal tear, and then once I got back in shape, I come back to the school, and we're just doing the warm-ups, and I'm doing laps around the mat, and I tore a calf muscle just hopping around. And I question whether or not I can continue to do this. Hard to think that in my mid-40s, I'm like, I'm getting too old for this. So I took 5 years off the mat, mostly because our school had closed down at the time. And a bunch of my friends.
What school was it?
It was out in Sunland. So the gentleman that gave me my
Tom.
Yeah, so it was Alessandro Nevaez. So I had started training under Vander Braga and Alessandro Nevaez, and I got my brown belt from them. And after
those were the Vander Braga was the guy here in this area,
He was
like upland to Glendale too, right?
Oh yeah. He
was the guy. He was the legit, Brazilian that was here.
It was, and one of the things that I miss about him is first of all, he was always a great instructor, a great competitor,
good person, good, like nice guy.
And but every now and then he'd come in a bad mood, and we're like, oh man, today we're gonna suffer in the warm up. He'd walk around, and you just knew he was in a mood, but that was good. That was also good. That was motivating. And then you remember when he got stuck in Brazil.
Yeah.
And that's when well, here's the funny story about Vander. I'd went over to move under him and a handful of other friends. Oh, also, I think Professor Tom. I trained with Tom.
Yeah.
And we all switched over to Vander. We liked his class, his energy, his attitude. But he kept losing locations. I think we started off in Glendale, and then he was with Fabio and Iha. Then they parted ways. Then he opened up a different location. I want to say this was probably still in Glendale.
Montrose, right? Yeah.
Well, then
that
Montrose.
Was after.
Then Montrose, and then I think we had a couple of addresses in Montrose. We had a small spot, then a larger spot, and that's when he got stuck in Brazil, and he wasn't going to be back for years. So later, Alessandro took over the school, and then he moved out to Sunland, and we were under him. So Professor Tom got his black belt from him a few months after I got. I was one of his first black belts, and then he left to go be one of the head instructors at a UFC gym. So the school wasn't really able to stay afloat without him. One of my buddies that got his black belt with me, Renee, took over the school, but 6 months later, it just wasn't working out. So we closed, and everyone scattered.
Do you remember Rudy Fishman?
Yeah, I remember Rudy Fishman very well.
Yeah. How did he take over? Was he was training with Vander as well, was he?
Mm-hmm.
And then he didn't take over the school. He just opened up another school later on. Is that what happened?
He took over the location. So back then, it was, I can't remember what the name of it was, but Fight Forum? So the location
like that,
in Montrose, that's where I got my black belt.
That's right, Fight Forum, I think.
Yeah, but Alessandro and the school owner.
It's cool because I would always come in and out. I would visit my wife,
Yeah.
And I would just check in with people that are in the area, I didn't think I was going to be I would just do that because that's what I do.
Yeah.
And I would talk to Vander Braga, and there was a place on Glen Oaks, which is like a showroom now or something, right? It was like some lion. I think there was some Armenian partner. Do you remember that place? It was on Glen Oaks. It was like this huge place.
It sounds familiar. It sounds familiar.
I think it was Lion something, right?
Yeah.
And that was one of the places. And then later on, he moved to like Fight Forum, I think, or opened a Fight Forum.
Yeah,
And he was there, and then he was in like Upland, but like both, right? Both places.
oh yeah, that was the Gauntlet.
Gauntlet.
I remember the Gauntlet because I went out there for the grand opening, and there were at least a couple of months where we were like jiu-jitsu gypsies, where we had no location.
Yeah, yeah.
I got my brown belt in Vander Braga's backyard because I think at least for a month we were doing training in his backyard mats, old school. But also I think Sit Yog Tong. When next door,
right.
It was Freddie Sabatini's.
When I first moved to LA, I was training there.
Yeah,
that's right.
We trained there for about 2 months. So Freddie, being friends with Vander, offered him mat space. So he'd have his class. Then our group would come in, have a class after for about a half an hour. We would mix it up. So I got to meet a lot of those folks that have since become friends. And then later, I think they became Sia Polista. So I know a lot of those folks. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. Like that 2007, 8, and that's when Vander Braga got stuck in Brazil.
Yeah,
went home and then didn't come back.
Right, but he has since been back. I think he's set up on
North
the East
Carolina,
Coast of North Carolina,
something like that. Yeah,
yeah.
I did a podcast with him and told me the story of just because he had a choice to do other things, to do real estate and do other things, but he's like, no, I want to do this. I want to do this.
Yeah.
And so it was really inspiring. I was like, wow, you're really, this is your passion, because he could have been doing a lot of other things, but he's stuck with doing jiu-jitsu.
I see his posts on from his new school. And I remember him telling me he was trying to decide whether or not he was going to stay in the Upland area with one of his affiliate schools or move to North Carolina. And I remember he was telling me, because I when he visited, I think it was one of his first visits, I went out to I think he was given a 4th degree to one of my friends, and so I went out there for a seminar and caught up with him, and it was great. It was like his old classes because he mixes in some humor.
Yeah,
he keeps it really entertaining, and of course he's just an encyclopedia of knowledge. But that's when he told me, and then I think I was following him. Then a couple of months later, then I see that he set up shop in North Carolina. So I'm glad he's doing well.
Yeah, I've always got along well with his guys and the students and stuff. It's the vibe, right? The frequency. So yeah, I'm glad to see him doing well. He worked his butt off and stayed in the game.
Yeah, but so Rudy Fishman took over that Montrose location, and a lot of us had a choice to make whether or not we were going to follow Alessandro to Sunland, which I did do, and or stay there in that location. Or like Rudy, liked what he was doing. He did a great job setting that school up. Before he moved, I think he moved to Tennessee, and sold that school about a year later. And then once the school closed, like I mentioned, I drive past a dozen schools so I can come train here. You train where your friends are. You train where you feel like you belong. You feel like you're a member. And because there's no shortage of schools now in LA or anywhere really in the U.S.
Right. Yeah. What do you recommend to people to start to find a good school for them?
That's a good question. Well, the first thing I always remind folks is that little voice in your head that says, well, I'm going to lose 5 or 10 pounds first. I'm going to get in the gym. I'm going to run. I'm going to get there in shape. Don't do that. Just get on the mat. There's no better way to get in shape than to just jump in there. And the pain starts day one, and you got to get through your white belt years, or your white belt years, I guess it would be now. And just know that you got to get through. That's a rite of passage for everybody. The second thing is I would say try a few different schools. You got to go where you feel comfortable. There are competitive schools. There are laid-back schools. There's schools that maybe are a little bit more MMA focused or those types of things. I've never been to a bad school myself. I've always been warmly welcomed and a lot of friends. But you got to train where you feel welcome. You got to train where you feel motivated to show up. And so I've been a member here at Legacy for a year now, but I've been coming to Legacy Sunday Confession Masters for probably 3 years now. And Professor Leonidas was the first one to invite me here, and I just always felt welcome here. And walking in early morning, Sunday, I feel like Norm walking into Cheers. I feel like these are my people.
Yeah.
And I love it because it's a safe training place because there's a lot of folks there, north of 40 or even 50. And Legacy has a lot of folks in my age group where we train. It's focused on technique. And so I had not been motivated really to train. I'd been kind of a nomad for a couple of years. And, fortunately welcome at a lot of nearby schools and went to a lot of open mats or trained with friends' gyms, but just nothing really called out to me and motivated until I signed up here about a year ago. And I was looking at my calendar from this last year, kind of doing a year-end review, and I looked and I realized this is the first year in more than a dozen years that I've trained every week.
Wow.
I have, with the exception of one week where I think I was overseas, I didn't miss a week of training, either showing up here, more so Legacy Pasadena. And what I like particularly about Legacy is number one, the technique. Everyone is very technical and focused on the game. No one is trying to hurt anybody. A ton of black belts. And when I was here for the promotion event last month, I think I did a rough count. It was like 50 black belts here. I was like, wow.
On the mat, right, at the same time?
It was amazing sight. And so that works for me. And plus, I think between all the locations, there's a class going on every day at any time of the day. So I've become a fan of the early mornings at Legacy Pasadena because it's within a 20-minute drive. I like
you go to the 6 a.m.
Yeah, I go to the 6 a.m. class. I haven't in the past month though, and because I got sick a little bit and it was holidays, but I'll be back to being regular there. So
nice, good, good, yeah. Another question I was going to ask you about, your family. Like, what do they think? Like, you're consistent. Like you said, it's been a while. It's been like this consistent. Were you training every week?
Yeah, I think the positive with me switching to a morning training is that it really doesn't take any time away from the family. So my wife's in support of that. But a little while ago, I was telling you about the story about when I first trained.
Yeah.
Well, that first time I trained, I sprained my ankle and I came home. I came home way too late. And my wife of over 30 years, she's kind of waiting at the door. I like to imagine her standing there with a rolling pin or frying pan. But she was upset because I was late. And then I get out of the car and I forgot that I had sprained my ankle. So I topple over. And she's just looking at me.
Like me walking up the stairs right now.
Exactly. And she just looks at me and I said, honey, I'm going to start training in jiu-jitsu. And so that was her first impression. That was the first time that she ever heard me say the words of it. And my wife is very supportive. And but sometimes she'll joke about jiu-jitsu being the other woman. Or she could be relentless like, oh, okay, so instead of sitting here watching a movie with me tonight, you're going to go roll around with a bunch of sweaty men. Okay, go ahead. You do what you want to do. But she's generally pretty supportive as long as I always maintain a priority of family events. And we now have 3 grandkids that are trained jiu-jitsu.
Congratulations, wow.
And our 5-year-old granddaughter, Camila, who trains close to home, she almost never misses her classes. And I said,
that's beautiful.
Like, when are you going to watch me train? But she is really supportive. She loves it because she sees the kids getting into it. My grandson, Max, is 13. He's been training for a little bit over a year. And he didn't have a ton of interest in it until he was getting bullied at school a little bit. He was a little small for his age at the time. He likes to stay with us a lot. So on the weekends, I would say like, okay, you stay with us. We'll do as you like. I said, but your method of paying rent is training. So I drag him along whenever I can. And now he's loving it. And then his older sister got into it. They live out in Riverside, so they train over there at Açai Jiu-Jitsu, a very nice, warm, welcoming environment. And then when he stays with me, then I'll try and drag him along with me to Legacy Pasadena, or just roll with him in the garage.
Yeah. Awesome.
But I think she realizes the benefit now, because now she's thinking, this is a very legitimate self-defense art. It's a way of the kids staying in shape. And it's something that they're passionate about, and they love it, enjoy it. As a matter of fact, my granddaughter, Camila, her parents, my son and my daughter-in-law, wanted to get her involved, and I think they signed her up for soccer, they signed her up for ballet, and they signed her up for jiu-jitsu all at the same time. She had no interest in the other two. but she loves jiu-jitsu. So she has stuck with it now for, I'm going to say probably 6 months.
Nice.
Yeah. But she's pretty supportive, and she knows I need it. As a matter of fact, if I go too long without
That's
training.
what I was going to ask you, yeah.
Yeah. She'll say, you need to get back on the mat. You need to go. You're grumpy. You're not yourself. So she knows I need it. She just wants to make sure that she's always priority number one. So.
Yeah, we had a black belt. He was a high-level psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him, like, hey, why does it seem like people that do jiu-jitsu, they seem younger than they are?
Yeah.
Is it just me? And he's like, it's interesting you say that, because when you're a kid, right, everything's in the now, everything's in the present. But as you get older, everything's like in the past or in the future, Mm-hmm. And so when you train jiu-jitsu, you're in the present.
Right.
Right? And so it kind of brings you back to your childhood in a way, and it kind of just, makes you like be free and,
yeah.
Just better person,
You hit on something else that's really important about jiu-jitsu. It's not just the training time. It really is a lifestyle, and it is the social network that you build. And that's why I drive as far as I do to come train here with friends in an encouraging, environment. But the other day, I have a picture of my dad and my son when he was 1 and my wife together. It's one of my favorite photos, but it was the first time I looked at it where I realized my dad in that photo is the age that I am now. And wow. I realized and in that photo, my dad, he kind of looked like a little old man, at least to me. And I'm looking at him like, I guess that's how I'm supposed to look, right? If I wasn't training and exercising and eating right. Now, my dad did not take particularly good care of himself. And that's the thing that I love about jiu-jitsu. It's not just the mat time. It's the diet. It's the lifestyle. It's the light lifting.
The social, right?
Yeah, and the encouraging. Yeah, I have a few.
Doing something positive, right? Like the exercise and everything else that you're doing as part of that, right?
Yeah. And I should say something nice about a couple of the guys that I've been training. My best jiu-jitsu friends and longest training partners, Alex and Oleg. So Oleg's a double black belt. He's a jiu-jitsu black belt. And he also got his 10th planet. And then Alex I think he's also a 3rd or 4th degree. And he's under checkmat. We all used to train together.
You brought them in, right? In the
brought
Sunday
them in.
morning?
They've been a legacy masters, And during the pandemic, it's hard to think of it this way, but pandemic's one of the best things that happened to me from a training perspective, because I had just started up training again. I was getting injured again. I didn't really have a game plan for how I would train and further develop my skills. So the pandemic hits, and you can't train anywhere. And of course, everyone was wearing masks. Everyone was afraid about being within proximity. Everyone was staying home. And I think I got a call from Alex, and he had said, "Man, I can't not train. I'm just not myself." I said, "I'm the same way." So we started training in his garage, and our wives accepted that as long as we limited it to just each other. And then Oleg had moved back from the Bay Area, and he joined in with us, and he had to make the same commitment. So only us 3 guys trained together for, say, probably about 5 or 6 months, until the gym started opening back up again. But yeah, number one, those guys keep me on the mat, because I think every couple of days I get an encouraging text from them. "Hey, what are you doing?" Alex, and what I love about Alex, he's kind of like, he's one of my best friends, but he's also kind of my frenemy as well. Like, "Hey, what are you doing, old man? You're probably sitting on the couch drinking an IPA. I'm going for a 5-mile run." I'm like, "Damn." And I guess I better
that's
train.
how guys talk to each other, right? They're
Exactly.
good friends. They're good friends.
Yeah. And I've made those kind of friends here too. And Professor Ago. So the other day, I was teasing him a little bit, because I said every time I would sit down and get comfortable at home over the holidays, I'd see your Instagram feed and see that you're going for a run or
cycling,
lifting
right?
and doing something. And I'll never forget what he said. I said, "Well, this year, I'm definitely going to get more serious about my workout regimen and my diet." And he says, "Well, I'll help you." He says, "But the secret is move every day, move every day." And so I think that's a nice, simple rule to keep in mind.
That's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. When we stop moving, that's how you get old, right?
Exactly. And especially, I really should put this photo out where I can remember it. And as much as I love and miss my dad, I look at it, it's like, okay, that's what I'm supposed to look like. And, you know, jiu-jitsu.
You said you back when you were younger, you saw that, you looked at the picture, or this
Well,
is
when I
recently?
looked at the picture, it just looked like, you know, a proud grandfather, his daughter-in-law, and his grandson. But now looking at it today, realizing that he's the same age in that photo as I am today, and realizing
Different.
we look
Totally different.
very different in terms of health. And so jiu-jitsu has just been fantastic, because to stay on the mat, you got to stretch, you got to recover, you have to eat right. And so it's just, I'm convinced jiu-jitsu's added 10 years to my life.
Mm-hmm.
And now also too that I'm an older guy. So I was telling you about those injuries I had in my mid-40s that scared me off the mat for 5 years. Well, because the school disbanded, everyone scattered, and I just wasn't motivated to train, so I took 5 years off. But I was scared because
So much other people, right? It's like,
Yeah.
if you're not with your people, you don't feel
right. But then when I
motivated.
came back,
Mhm.
I said, okay, I'm going to do it right. I'm going to eat right. I'm gonna stretch a lot. I'm going to be very careful about how I train. You know, I've changed a lot of my game. How can I say it? I make sure I'm in safe positions all the time, you know, and I think, you know, there's one, I guess, principle about just keeping your body aligned, right? Just never being twisted, never allowing your arms to be separated, just stay tight. And I'm also a fan of, have you heard of Preet Mickelson?
Pre-Nicholson?
Preet Mickelson.
Mickelson?
Yeah, he's huge in Europe. And you've heard of BJJ Globetrotters,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Mhm.
So he's one of their featured instructors. So he's from Estonia. Very big in Europe, but almost nobody's heard of him here. And I could also see why it's maybe not as popular a concept, but he focuses on defensive jiu-jitsu, postures, escapes. And for whatever reason, he does a seminar every year up in Santa Maria. And I have a couple of friends that have a gym up there, and I've been going the last few years. And, you know, I did so primarily to learn how not to get submitted and how to be more defensive. But the body positions that he teaches have also kept me injury-free since I started adopting these. So I don't go for any of these crazy moves. You know, you won't see me do.
Gave you more body awareness.
Yeah, but also just a way of staying safe. Even when you got a giant opponent on top of you, there's a way to keep your body aligned and, you know, keep your limbs in a position and stay tucked in a manner in which you're just not going to get injured much. So this year, I think, has probably been my first injury-free year. So for me to have trained consistently every week and not get injured, I'm like, I don't think I've ever had a year like that in jiu-jitsu. So that's been great, which is important once you're a bit older, right? Because I want to be able to sustain this for as long as I can. You know, I want someday be walking around these mats with mean looks like Alan Savage.
That's right. Yeah, I got to get you coming into a tacfit class one of these days.
I
you
do.
know?
I know.
Just to get some body wear, like some, you know, just learning some basic things you can add to your, you know, your toolbox, right?
Yeah.
For training, training for life. Because I want to see you guys be your best at every age.
Yeah.
Whatever age it is, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. The you know, those training protocols and that. So, you know, I've been working from home most days each week since the pandemic. So little by little, I've outfitted my workstation, which is set up in my garage. So I have a really nice kind of a cubicle setup, monitors, and dedicated space for training. But little by little, I've built up, you know, my garage gym. You know, I have the mats, I have the Bulgarian bag, I have the club bells. I wish I'd
you have some club bells?
Yeah, I wish I'd got the tacfit club bells.
Oh, that's okay. But
I got
it's understanding the whys behind it, right?
Yeah, well, because I tried them out at Pasadena, and they feel so much more natural.
Yeah, they're the best club bells for sure. Tacfit club bells are the, you know.
Yeah, my wife got them for me as a gift.
The Scott Sonnen, the Tacfit creator, he's the one who so all the design and all the thought put into everything.
Yeah, they're very they feel very natural in your hand, and for anyone that hasn't actually held a club bell, a 10-pound club bell is heavy, and if you're thinking about a 10-pound dumbbell, well, that's light, that's nothing. You're rarely ever going to reach for that. But because the club bell, you know, the weight is offset, and it's just putting that pressure on your forearm. Yeah. And you can see the benefit to your shoulder. Oh, that was the other thing. my shoulder when I came back for our jiu-jitsu was in such bad shape.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say for about 6 months, my right shoulder was in such bad condition that I was just convinced that I was going to need surgery. And I got to a point where even rolling over in bed would wake me up in pain. And since I started, tossing around club bells and kettlebells, I noticed my shoulders have been just solid.
Love it. That's it.
But I definitely got to take you up on the
we'll spend some time, just even talking about stuff.
I think Professor Wade was the one, because I was asking about, because
he's an example, because his knees, his neck, his spine, everything, right? And now he's like living his best life. He's training. He's strong when he's training.
Yeah. Well, the other one, I'll tell you what's scary.
And he's healthy.
Is the very sweet but deadly black belt ladies of Legacy that also do tacfit, because, I think I was going against Professor Monica maybe a couple of weeks ago, and I must have like 60, 70 pounds on her, right? And number one, she's just a fantastic, jiu-jitsu black belt, but just you can feel her strength.
She knows how to activate.
I want to be careful. I always want to be careful how I say that, because it's always that passive aggressive, like jab at you, like, oh, bro, you're strong. Which is like the ultimate, like.
But it's technique, right? How to grab, how to activate certain things in the body, and that's what tacfit gives you, because it teaches you, like, speaking of the structure, how to activate everything, right? And how to understand your body better, how to turn on your lats and your butt and all the different things that we don't even think about until you start to learn. You're like, oh, okay, that's technique. At the highest level. I remember Hicks and Gracie, the Henry Atkins. I
remember seeing him as a blue belt.
So he came in, and he came in a couple times, and he was talking about these different things, these concepts, and it's great. It's amazing, And then a lot of guys that do tacfit, they're like, oh, it's tacfit, right? So it's like understanding things at a deeper level allows you to, be better, do the best jiu-jitsu, the best everything in life, right? Living your life in efficient and the right way.
What I love is it's something you could do every day,
right? And you should be doing it every day.
Well, what I love about it too is because I'm just naturally jittery. So when I'm at home and I'm in a meeting and I have a couple of minutes, I could reach for a kettlebell or a club bell or one of my, other training pieces there, and just kind of fidget with it and toss it around. So, goal is pick up something heavy every day.
Yeah, that's it.
And then, like I said, when I just did this year in review, I said, I realized I haven't had any injuries.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Nice. There's what tacfit is based on is this thing called CST, circular strength training. And there's 3 rings. One is the interflow, how to move all of your joints around each other. The second thing is like the moving yoga, like flow fit, and so it's moving your body in all of the different directions, like mobility and being able to do that. And then the third is the third ring is like the club bell, the strength component, And so one is not separate from the other, all interconnected with your breath and just all the different things that work. And so within that, you basically stay super, not just healthy, but you live your best life. It's like a coffee. If you move all of your joints, like the energy and the way we're designed, right? So Scott Son in the tacfit career, he says like do interflow every day, and you can just do it takes like 10 minutes, depending on the speed that you do it. Move your joints every day. Get your heart rate up one time around 20 minutes, right? And then lift something heavy like once a week, once or twice a week. That's it. That's the formula,
And I think that's the other thing too that's probably turned my wife more into a supporter of me training. She realized that it has kept me young. It's kept me mobile. Keeps me healthy to chase our grandchildren around. And, many years active, although the other day, she made fun of me because I was trying to move my dog. I love my dog, a beagle named Bogey, or Bogart, but his name is Bogey. And I was trying to put him in the room, trying to put him to bed, and he kind of got out of my hands, lost it. And anyway, I tripped and fell, right? And it was in the hallway. And I landed in this weird, awkward position, very much like a turtle on his back, because I was up against the wall, and my wife ran out and saw me fall, and she was like, "Oh my God, you're a real old man now. You fall and you can't get up." I'm like, I'm a jiu-jitsu black belt. I'm stuck here in front of my wife. But yeah, so.
That's great, man. That's that's it, right? We want to stay healthy to be able to do all the things that we want to do, be able, play with our kids, play with our grandkids, and stay doing the things that we want to do.
Yeah.
Right? Jiu-jitsu, whatever it may be.
And I love it. And I can't ever imagine myself not doing it. And like I said, at some point, I'd probably, I just turned 58 last month. So now I'm at the point, and I was talking to some others about it, like, we're starting to get probably a little more selective about our training partners.
That's it, though. That's it.
You have to. Sometimes you have to politely decline because you want to stay safe and you want to sustain yourself in the sport. Yeah. And, the proof's in the pudding. I feel great. I feel flexible, mobile, in shape. And, it's like, I'm planning to do this as long as I can. But when I see people like Alan out there still rolling, or like I said, my other buddy that just got his black belt at 76, and he's still rolling with everybody.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can do this.
Yeah. Like Helio Gracie, right? He was, he stayed on the mat till the end, and I just hear stories from like Saulo Ribeiro and these different guys that are around him, and he just changes his mindset of what is winning, right?
Yeah.
You can't submit me, and just it's like, okay, am I going to be the best guard passer or whatever it is? But he changes his mindset of what is winning, right? And I think winning, I think for me, just looking at it, and you speak about it. It's like winning is staying on the mat and training, right?
Yeah. I was talking to Professor Leonidas the other day, and we were just chatting about this, and he said, I don't particularly like submitting people. I'm into this. I like the roll. I like the control. I think the same thing. I like the scrambles. I like the escapes, the transitions. I want the full match. And, if I submit someone, rarely will you ever hear someone say, oh, Gilbert was really working hard to submit that guy or choke that guy. No. If I choke or armbar, it's because they presented it. They put it out there because I like the roll.
You let it flow.
I let it flow. That's what I like. And, I love that about my training partners here, that especially at Masters, because everyone is so technical here. There are no boring moments. We get a full 5 or 6 minute round, and it's a flowing round. And, I love it. So I try to make it here every Sunday. That's just my thing.
I love it. Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Man, I wanted to ask you, because you've been around for so long, from the 90s and on the mat, back in the 90s, and I'm going to ask you like what it is now, right? But what makes this a good school? What made a good school in the 90s?
What made a good school in the 90s? There were so few of them. That's a hard one to say. If I can go back in time, I would probably advise, make sure you go somewhere where it's a Brazilian with a lineage that you can kind of trace back, to the Graciers, what have you. I guess I would still say the same thing too. I said make sure you understand the lineage of who you're learning from. But a welcoming environment. I like a school. I'm a big fan of competition as an experience. Like I said, I didn't particularly enjoy competing myself, but that pressure of standing in front of all your teammates, your coach yelling at you, the crowds out there, and a guy or an opponent that you're facing off with that's going to do everything within their power to submit you or beat you on points. I think it's an experience everyone has to experience at least a few times. But you train where your friends are. You train where you feel welcome. And I've traveled a lot. I've been a guest at many schools, and I can say that most of them are friendly and most of them are welcoming, and I've rarely encountered a bad vibe anywhere. But you got to go where you fit in, and you are within a circle of supportive friends. So I have a bunch of friends here at Legacy that we text each other, we talk to each other, and I just love that there's such a healthy influence on my life. I think when I look at within my circle outside of jiu-jitsu, I think a lot of folks think, oh, Gilbert's in great shape. He looks great for a guy in his late 50s. He eats right, he works out, he's a jiu-jitsu black belt. But then I show up here, and then I see people here that are about my age that are in phenomenal shape. Professor Ray was just at a boxing match.
Yeah.
And I was so impressed by that. I was like, wow, that's amazing. or Aiko, with the amount of training that he's doing all the time. And and I realized, like, no, I still have a way to go. I really need to get even a little bit more, disciplined about my training and diet and regimen. But I'm motivated to come here. And I think that would be the first thing. Can you find good jiu-jitsu schools anywhere? Yeah, you pretty much can. But if you're not motivated to go there, and it's not an encouraging, supportive environment, then maybe you want to pass. But I'm a big advocate of, you got to try a few classes, see how you feel. And one of the things that I like about Legacy is that it's not just that there's a class every day, almost every time of the day, but you got different types of classes. So one of my favorite classes is Professor Ricky's drills class on Mondays and Wednesdays. Because that's
530. They started calling it
the what?
The 530, the 530, because it's 530. Yeah,
I love it because it is more focused on fundamental movements and drills with a light amount of rolling. But on a day where I don't really feel up to sparring, I can still benefit from that class. Or the other class that I love is Professor Uday's no-gi class. I just love Uday. He's just like full of energy.
Enthusiastic, yeah.
He just makes you want to get out there. And I just love the way he runs his class because just an incredible amount of positive energy in there. It's hard for me to get out here during the week because of the traffic. It's a 25-minute ride on a Sunday morning, but Monday through Friday it's a little tough. But I do try to make that. But Pasadena as well has a ton of classes, great people to train with. So it's been a good fit for me. So thanks for being But thanks for allowing me to be a part of Legacy Masters for 3 years, but also kind of giving me a new training home because I've just been way more motivated to train here.
Love it, man. Love to hear that. That's what it's about right there. Yeah. I was going to ask you, who have been some of your favorite jiu-jitsu fighters, athletes? It can even be guys that fought in the early days, Valetudo, and all those. Some of the guys you looked up to, maybe coming up, and even now.
Well, I'll tell you, I guess my Mount Rushmore, the guys that I really look to that have inspired. I mean, number one is Rickson, and because Rickson was not just the champion of the family, but he almost had this mystical quality about him, very Zen-like, and almost a little bit scary too. The first few times I met him, as a matter of fact, one of my best friends that joined jiu-jitsu at the same time that I did, he was on the mat when I think it was Yoji Anjo who showed up to challenge
him. Yeah,
he was in the room when that happened. Just to summarize that story, this Japanese, martial arts champion showed up to challenge Rickson to a big, televised fight, and he showed up with photographers and cameramen, and Rickson was so offended, he said, "Okay, I'll give you the fight. We're going to do it right here, right now." And they videotaped it, and the winner got to keep the tape, and Rickson demolished him. And I heard the story firsthand from my buddy Tino, and it's probably so much better how I imagined it. And of course, he wrote it up in his book, Breathe. But just that quality, just know that there's this guy out there, and he lived and breathed jiu-jitsu and that lifestyle. So that was one of the first influences I had. And of course, John Jock, of course, was also another influence and what I felt I learned from him was just jiu-jitsu as a beautiful, artistic expression. His movement it was so different than what I had seen anyone else do, and that really inspired my style because I don't really have an aggressive style. I like the flow, and I think that traces all the way back. As a matter of fact, my go-to sweep is what I learned from him, the butterfly sweep, and of course the guard work that I learned from him. Marcelo Garcia is another. As a matter of fact, my greatest jiu-jitsu moment, I think ADC 2005, Long Beach Pyramid.
Oh yeah,
was when he took on Rico Rodriguez.
Yeah.
And Rico Rodriguez must have been about 230, 240 pounds, and Marcelo must have been about 170 pounds. And they're going at it, and he gets, and it's like watching Yoda and Count Dooku fight because Marcelo was just hopping all over the place, frustrating the heck out of Rico. And he gets on his back, and then Rico just launches himself backward and basically slams Marcelo on the mat, and I think knocked him out for like a split second or two because they had to break up the match. And then the fight continued, and Marcelo submitted him. And that arena was packed. I don't think anyone was seated. They were screaming. I was like, oh my God! It was a true David and Goliath thing, and I was there watching it live, just screaming my head off, just seeing this guy. And it was the first time I think I'd ever seen Marcelo, and I saw him go against, because he fought in his weight division, and then also in the absolute where he fought, where he met Rico, and that was just an incredible moment. And then today, who I'm watching a lot is Craig Jones. Really enjoy him. And he's a lot of fun to watch, and I think he's a good ambassador. And he cracks me up. I can't really take him too seriously on the set, but I love watching the videos of him just rolling apart. Gym training, right? Not the competition.
He markets jiu-jitsu. He markets jiu-jitsu in a good way.
Yeah.
He gets people wanting to watch it.
Yeah.
Wanting to be a part of it.
Yeah. Probably would also throw Rafa Mendez in there. He's another guy that I just really, really, loved. And so a little while ago, I was talking about the pandemic kind of being good for me, or at least for my jiu-jitsu game. Because I was training in a nearby gym, my house, and I was training at our 6:30 a.m. classes, and we had a black belt from AOJ, a fellow named Elvis, and we were training, 2-3 times, a week in the morning. I want to say half the time it was just me and him. And
this is in the early morning?
This was in the early morning, and during the pandemic when attendance was a bit low. And half the time it was just him and I, and it really started to turn into one-on-one coaching, and he really rebuilt my game. And so I learned a lot of those things that I guess you would say the AOJ side is famous for doing. For example, his pressure passing, his side-to-side movement, De La Riva guards, those types of things that I never did before. As a matter of fact, I didn't have that much of a guard before then, but I think over maybe 2 years of that, I really rebuilt my game. So I owe him a lot of thanks for that. So
nice. Where do you see the future of jiu-jitsu going? Being a part of it, right? Since kind of like the earlier days in America, and seeing it grow and evolve with the Ultimate Fighter and UFC becoming a mainstream sport and everything else, because it's interconnected, right?
Yeah,
in a way.
I think it's jiu-jitsu is here to stay, and it's only got growth. Now I hear a lot from the no-gi crowd saying that gi jiu-jitsu is dead, but I think the last Worlds in Vegas,
the Master Worlds,
had
the biggest tournament ever.
10,000 people.
Nah, it's all hype. Those gi tournaments, they're the ones that fund all the no-gi things.
Exactly, but also
it's all interconnected.
Gi jiu-jitsu, I think, is something you could do at all age. So, for example, me as an older grappler, I was going against a young guy the other day, and he was so fast moving. I was working the open guard. It was almost like I'm reaching here, and by that time he's there, right to the right, and it's the grips that allow me to neutralize that speed and power element, right? And I think there's a great statement. I think it might have been Conor McGregor that precision beats power and timing beats speed. And I think with gi jiu-jitsu, you have the ability to neutralize some of those things, either by having effective grips or effective frames to be able to deal with a larger opponent or a faster, more powerful opponent. Now, I love no-gi. But I kind of picked it up lately, right? So earlier I was talking about my buddy Oleg, who is an absolute, fanatic about the no-gi game. He's amazing leg lock game. He's an amazing teacher as well. So when we would train, of course he would always want to go no-gi, and I'd roll my eyes because I'm one of those old school gi guys. And it seemed as soon as he got his hands on my foot, I'm being heel hooked. I'm like, damn, I hate heel hooks. I don't like no-gi. I don't consider myself that good. But see, in the old days too, I think in the mid '90s, you wouldn't get a blue belt unless you were proficient without the gi.
Right.
Because I know at least the Machados would say, "No, my friend, you need to learn."
That's it. That's how it was, right? Yeah. You were a well-rounded jiu-jitsu fighter, if you want to call it like that. Even like self-defense fighting, right?
Yeah.
You would know how to fight.
Yeah. So somewhere over the last year, I have just developed a love of the no-gi game, and I think I've got over that concern I had about, okay, I'm not fast enough, I'm not powerful enough.
You just adapt and adjust. Yeah.
I think I learned a little bit more about how to protect my feet, which makes me feel safer in that rolling environment, because that's what you have to look out for is the heel hooks. And I was really scared of those. But now that I know how to effectively deal with them, like, okay, I feel good about them. So I make sure maybe at least a third of my time I'm doing no gi. And I love it. I think it's fantastic. And I've also, probably refined my game a little bit. So I'm not having to think about a gi and no gi game. Like I'm using just common grips, like a lot of C-clamp grips.
Yeah.
So that way I don't have to stop and think about what type of match I'm in.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I expect this sport to go bigger and better. And, I look at the kids' classes and, just a ton of kids that are loving it because, just looking at my granddaughter, she picked jiu-jitsu over ballet and soccer. And she's loving it. And she hasn't got tired of it either. Because that's the other thing. You worry, like, how long can you keep their limited attention spans focused on jiu-jitsu? And, the smarter schools, like what Legacy does, is incorporate games, right? To keep them engaged, to keep it fun. Almost not make them aware that they're learning jiu-jitsu. But I look forward to seeing, that wave of talent, coming forward. So I think it's amazing. And the other thing that's neat to see is the American influence on jiu-jitsu, where they've applied, maybe more. Look at the heel hook leg lock game, which you probably got to give a lot of credit to John Danaher and his team, but where they've applied more science to the training. Because I remember when I started training, you would learn an arm bar. You would learn it in very simple steps. You move your hips here, you bring the leg over his head, and you pull, but there's probably a lot more nuance that goes into that. And I think that's one of the influences of the American side that jiu-jitsu has had on applying those science. And let's face it, this is still an evolving sport. They're still developing new moves. And I'll tell you, one of the frustrations I have that's challenging is not just not knowing these moves, not even being able to know their names, Yeah. So this is one of my cranky old man stories is like, back in my day, we didn't have names.
We've heard the Hands of Gracie when it's like, don't make it harder. Don't make it fancy. Just show me the move,
Yeah. Exactly.
But it's good to put some names and some, so you have a reference, right, of what that is.
And now it's become global. It's worldwide. Back then, you had Brazil, then you had the U.S. Now you've got these overseas.
Oh man, Europe. Asia.
Yeah.
Even like the Russia and the guy that's growing like wildfire over there.
Yeah, and they're all having
Middle East, right?
An influence on the sport. So our mutual friend, John Iwano, my first jiu-jitsu friend, now 5th degree black belt. Yeah. I'm joining him next month in New Zealand.
Oh.
And he is doing a tour. He goes every year. And this is the oddest thing because he does have his own association. He's got schools throughout. And, of course, he's got his line of gis and MMA gear. But he developed a friendship with a Maori tribe out there. Because I was asked, because he invited me to join him this year. And I say, how do you have 7 or 8 affiliate schools over there? And we had a mutual friend that we used to train with back in the day that was a Reverend John, and I guess he would do missionary work.
Reverend John, did he fight MMA?
Yeah. I think he did.
No, John Jensen? Jensen, yeah. We fought on some of the early King of the Cage cages back in the day together, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Also,
he was involved with Millennium MMA, right?
Yeah, and I think you also faced off with Javi.
Yeah.
Because I trained with him when he was a blue belt. But I guess he was doing missionary work out there. And they started to take an interest in jiu-jitsu, and a club formed, and it developed into 7 or 8 schools. But I guess he said, no, the guy that you really want to have out here is John. And, again, John being my oldest friend, but we're like grumpy old men jiu-jitsu, right? But he invited me to join him, and I'm like, wow, and we're getting hosted there by the tribe and seeing the whole country and doing a little seminar tour. I'm really looking forward to it.
It's awesome, man.
Yeah, but this has gone global. Yeah, so there's no turning back on this. So I'm looking forward to seeing my grandkids compete. My goal is that one of them decides to make a competitive run and be a future world champion. Yeah.
That's it. That's what it's about right there, right? Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to have you in the Sunday mornings, and I'll have you officially part of the Legacy family. I've always appreciated you have a kindness about you,
Yeah.
And it's really, really great to just sit down with you and like kind of hear a little bit of your background your family and grandkids doing jiu-jitsu, and look forward to us, keeping on staying on the mat and being our best, throughout the years to the end.
Thanks for having me. It's been an honor to be a guest here on the podcast, and thanks for giving me a welcoming, friendly training environment, and kind of giving me access to some new great friends, and I look forward to continuing training here many years. So thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, brother. Thank you.